Chapter 11. Addictive Kisses. In the days that followed, Isabella grew surprisingly distant. I had hoped I might get some flirtatious text or that she might show up at my doorstep again, but there was nothing. She was temporarily assigned to cover Ginger's shift until the poor girl was healed and back on her feet. Thought maybe I should give Isabella some space, some time to process everything that I had revealed to her. I hope she can forgive me. I miss seeing her, miss kissing her, miss the touch of her skin. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and I texted her. Hi, you okay? I didn't expect her to respond right away, but I grew antsy as hours passed. With no reply, a full day went by with no word from her. Was she ghosting me? Then a middle-aged woman was brought in, badly bleeding and cut to pieces. Didn't have time to think about what Isabella and I were to each other. My entire focus was on saving this woman's life. I failed. The police thought she'd been attacked by an alligator. I knew that it was something far worse. Damien and his pack were to blame. This was a message meant for me. It was intended to strike fear in my heart, but instead I only burned hotter with anger. Something had to be done to save the innocent people of Breaux Bridge from this nightmare. I was typing up the death certificate when Isabella walked through the front door. She wasn't in her hospital scrubs. Strange that not wearing them would make her seem out of place. She looked around to make sure no one was listening. I'll make this short. Don't worry, I won't take up much of your time. Isabella was still upset. Despite that, I couldn't help but smile at the sound of that mild Kansas accent. Her lips were pressed together tightly. I wanted to kiss them so badly. I didn't care who saw. I've spent days waiting to hear from you, she said. Then when I finally do, you send me a text with barely 3 words. What the hell does that even mean? I thought I should give you some space, I said matter-of-factly. We have amazing sex, you tell me that you want me, then everything goes crazy. She folded her arms. When I need you the most, you just act like nothing happened. I do want you, I said, grabbing onto her wrist to pull her in closer to me. We just needed to lay low for a little while. I realized the moment I said it that it was a mistake. Her face turned from anger to hurt. I am trying to protect you, I told her. Tell me the truth, she said. Why have these last few days felt like a physical withdrawal? Your saliva can cure cancer. What else can it do? I loosened my grip on her wrist and took a step back from her. I had promised to tell her everything, to keep nothing back. There is almost no chance of my saliva turning you into a werewolf from just my kisses. I cringed as I saw the horror of the possibility cross her face. Stomach acid and the digestive system dilutes the virus significantly by the time it reaches your bloodstream. But there is another effect. Enough of my saliva or other fluid will cause you to be unreasonably drawn to me. That may be what you are experiencing, but by now the effect has faded. You are free to choose, you always have been. But this was the only way I could be totally sure that it was your choice. Do you still want to be with me? Yes, she answered quickly. More than anything else. Are you sure? I asked. Maybe we should give it some more time just in case. I don't want that, she said. Why fight it? I know what I'm getting myself. You really don't, I said. If you did, you would leave now and never come back. This is all my fault. I knew what would happen and I still couldn't stop myself. Careless of who might see, she grabbed my head and pulled me in to kiss her. Could feel her wet lips parting wide. I tasted her tongue as it traveled across my mouth, uncaring of how much of my saliva it took in. I grabbed the back of her neck and she moaned and bit my lip, tugging it lightly. A doctor walked by across the hall and we jumped back, separating just in time. I could barely catch my breath. My heart thundered in my chest. 10 minutes, I said. Meet me in the on-call room. Try and be quiet. She nodded and left me there. I looked at my watch. What am I doing? I didn't care. After 9 minutes had passed, I couldn't wait any longer and made my way to the on-call room. The lights were off as I walked in and locked the door behind me. Isabella dropped her dress. With my night vision, I was able to see the gentle curve of her hips and the perfectly pointed nipples on her small breasts. She was beautiful. I rushed to take her in my arms and together we undid the buttons on my coat and ripped off my scrubs. We traded intense kisses and she stifled a giggle as I lifted her onto the bed. A lamp crashed to the ground as I climbed on top of her. We froze for a few seconds as I listened for any footsteps. When none came to investigate the sound, I continued kissing her slender neck and perky breasts. My tongue traveled lower to her stomach and thighs, before my head dipped between her legs. Isabella covered her mouth as she groaned in anticipation. She grabbed the hair on my head as I brought her closer to climax with my mouth and fingers. Her eyes began to roll back under her eyelids and her legs began to shake. I lifted my head, straddling her as I paused to meet her eyes. I knew mine would be glowing slightly in the dark. She was hungry for me, and I wanted to devour her. I thrust inside her and released a gasp of my own. We fit perfectly together. I felt Isabella's smooth legs wrap around me as I pushed deeper inside her. Kissing her lips and her ear, I whispered to her how good she felt as we grinded together in perfect harmony. The bed felt like it was going to break in two at any second. Creaked louder and louder with each thrust. Isabella had to bite into my shoulder to keep from screaming. I pulled on her hair harder than I ever had, barely restraining a growl building in my chest. I kept having to pull myself back to stop from damaging her delicate body. Harder, I'm almost there, she said. I nearly lost control. I wanted to bite her. Instead, I spun and pulled her tight little body on top of me. I could feel the primal rush as she rode me, moving her wet sex up and down my throbbing shaft. I let her take control. I caressed her creamy skin, feeling the shape of her ass. I scratched Isabella's naked back, just barely breaking the skin. Sorry, I said, panting from the passion coursing through me. Very naughty, she giggled. But I like it. Let's see if you do. She scratched my shoulders and biceps and bit into my chest as she slammed up and down on me. I fondled her hard nipples with my thumb as I moved with her. I was ready to erupt. Luckily, she came just then, arching her back and moaning. I have never seen a sexier sight in my life. I finished inside her, my brain lighting up with an explosion of pleasure. After christening the on-call room, rumors began to fly around St. Martin of our relationship. We didn't really care what other people thought. Together we made an unstoppable team, healing patients and as a mated pair. I felt drawn to her like no other, confident that we could stand together against any challenge. We flirted constantly during our shifts, but we tried to keep it to a minimum. Whenever anyone else was around, after clocking out, we couldn't keep our hands or mouths off of each other. We did it again in the parking lot in my car. On the way back to my house, Isabella leaned over the center console and unbuttoned my pants. She started giving me roadhead as I was driving, and I had to pull off the side of the road, either that or crash into a tree. For the rest of that week, she came home with me every night. After work, we would cook together and have sex until we passed out. Sometimes we woke up and listened to the sounds of the bayou as we enjoyed the fire together. The crickets were like a soothing mother's song, and the frogs the gentle lull of the ocean. Other times we would sleep late until the afternoon, fitting in more sex in the shower before starting a long night of work. It was the happiest I had ever been. I knew it couldn't last. The next morning, I dropped Isabella off at her house to pick up a fresh change of clothes. She said it would take a while to deal with her roommates' questions, so I beat a hasty retreat and drove back home alone. I pulled up to the house and instantly knew something was wrong. I turned to see Damien standing boldly in my front yard. He wore a long dark coat and pair of sunglasses. Beside him were his henchmen, more like dogs than men, despite their human appearance. Gautier and Matthias growled as I got out of the car. "Morning, Doc," Damien said. "Glad to finally catch you alone. Had enough of your little nurse yet?" I walked past them up to my front door. "I'd offer you boys a drink, but I'm all out of water bowls." Gautier and Matthias bared their teeth. Damien just smiled. "You know what we want," said Damien. "I've given you enough chances. Join my pack. Together we will rule this territory. You are pissing away your extended life doting on the weak. They are merely playthings for us. We are the next step in evolution, Roman. Stop resisting the inevitable." "I've already given you my answer," I said. The bolt on the door had been smashed. They had let themselves in. "But you haven't heard my last offer," said Damien with a grin. "Join us by the next full moon, or we will kill your new mate." The hair on my arms jumped straight up and I took a half step towards him. Gautier and Matthias moved in front of Damien protectively. I had the urge to dive into them, tearing out and eating their still beating hearts. just barely I kept myself in check. I don't take kindly to threats, Damien, I said. I've declawed stronger. Alpha's for less. If you even touch her, I'll tear your damn head off your neck. Do you understand me? Damien lifted up his sunglasses so that I could see his wink. We'll see about that. He looked to his two lackeys. Teach the good doctor a lesson in respect. He turned to leave as Gautier and Matthias came towards me. Gautier paused to smash his fist into my car door, ripping off a long strip of the outer layer of metal. He would be the first to die. I'm going to enjoy this, said Gautier. He wielded the metal like a knife, striding in and slashing at me. I rolled underneath a swipe and moved away from the house. No telling what they had done inside. Matthias growled and moved to the side to flank me. Gautier charged head-on. I was faster and sidestepped, grabbing his wrist and shattering it. You bastard, he yelled. The weapon fell to the ground. Matthias came in behind me, but I spun and threw Gautier into him. His wrist had healed by the time the pair rose to their feet. The two men looked at each other and snarled. This time they attacked from opposite sides in unison. I punched Matthias in the face, breaking his nose. Gautier managed to get his long arms around my neck, trying to put me into a hold. I smashed my elbow into his ribs with a crack and his grip loosened. Enough for me to tear free. Matthias tried to tackle me, but I leaped back, turning sideways and dragging him down to the ground instead. I smashed his head down on the ground and would have ended him forever, had Gautier not thrown a metal trash can at me. I slid back across the ground with the impact, my shoulder badly damaged by the greasy container. Matthias picked up the sharp piece of metal and fell into a crouch. Gautier pulled the cast iron pole free from my mailbox, swinging it like a hammer. I stood and ran towards the shed in the back. There's nowhere to run, Roman, Matthias called after me. But I wasn't running. If I could make it to my shed, I would find a weapon of my own. The smile on their faces faded as I emerged holding a tapered pike on a steel rod. The head had 10 sharpened, crosscut teeth on the back and a curved hook on the tip. It was called a gatorback hook, used for hunting the powerful creatures. It could cut through even the stubborn hide of an alligator. I went on the offensive, spinning the gatorback with practiced skill, tore through the thin metal that Matthias swung at me, cutting deeply into his arm. He fell back bleeding as Gautier swung his pole at my legs. I rotated the steel rod of the gatorback to block the blow, twirling the gatorback around my head. I struck at Gautier's head. He raised the pole and caught the hook of my weapon just in time. For the next few minutes we traded blows. With a powerful slash, I knocked the pole from Gautier's hands. I raised the spike of the gatorback, preparing to skewer him, but I made one mistake. Forgot about the loyalty that pack members have for each other. Matthias dove in front of the killing stroke, saving Gautier by taking the blow to his side. Instead, it inflicted a terrible wound. The hook caught on his ribs, setting fast as the hole began to close. Matthias dove to the ground, wrenching the weapon from my hand. Even with the injury, Matthias was able to kick out at my legs. I struggled to keep my balance. That was all Gautier needed to punch me in the throat as hard as he could. I fell to the ground, choking on my own blood and gasping for air. Gautier picked up his pole and raised it two-handed over his head to crush my skull. The metal staff descended towards my face. Suddenly, a great fireball the size of a bowling ball shot through the trees. It hit Gautier in the shoulder, bursting into flame that spread over his face and chest. He screeched in pain, running around in circles for a moment before falling to the ground, shaking embers and fire all around him. The attack had deflected the blow. Instead of connecting with my head, it thrust into my chest, puncturing my lungs. My vision blurred as Matthias pulled the gatorback free and crawled over to Gautier, trying to help him extinguish the flames. I saw the two limping away as I blacked out. Chapter 12. Powder casting. Roman, wake up, I said, shaking him desperately. I thought he could hear my voice, but he had lost a lot of blood from some serious internal bleeding. He was badly injured and hadn't yet had enough time to heal himself. I wasn't sure if he could, given his weakened state. I didn't want to think about what might have happened if Henrietta hadn't agreed to meet Roman and come with me that day to his house. Without her, he would have been killed by those two lowlifes. This is Henrietta, I said as I took his hand. You can trust her, Roman. A spark of recognition seemed to flare on his face at the name, but he only Had eyes for me. Perhaps the realization of his near death had finally settled in. Roman struggled to rise, to speak, but Henrietta helped me hold him down. Trégueux, she said. Lay still, Cher. Your body is trying to heal itself, but the damage is too great. You must let me help you. His breath only rattled in response, but he stopped struggling. That sound was a bad sign. It could mean that his ribs might have punctured his lungs. What if the lungs had healed shut with the bone still inside? I have seen wounds such as these before, Cher, said Henrietta. Let me tend to him. What can you do? I asked. Nothing in my training prepared me for injuries like these. Henrietta began muttering in Creole. She took out a small bag and sprinkled a green herb powder of some kind into the air. The particles seemed to float together in a cloud. Closing her eyes, she began tracing a shape in the air. The powder seemed to stick where she traced with her finger, creating a semi-transparent shape that floated above the table. Henrietta's hands moved faster and faster until an image of human lungs took form. I could see what looked like a piece of bone sticking out of the phantom shape. It's called powder casting. Think of it like an X-ray but much more powerful, said Henrietta. I need you to hold him down. This is going to hurt. I leaned heavily onto Roman's arms. Henrietta wrapped her fingers around the floating bone. She pulled. Roman screamed in agony and flailed his arms in pain. Even in this state he was amazingly strong. I was thrown to the floor, but bounced quickly back up, resuming my hold on him. Easy, Roman, I said. It will be okay. I looked up at the powdery lungs. The bone fragment was gone. I tried to soothe the murder out of his eyes. She had to pull the bone from your lung so it could heal shut. Roman laid back with a growl, then closed his eyes as I continued to caress his face. He still looked very weak. The worst of it is done, said Henrietta. She handed me a small pouch filled with thin reddish-brown leaves. Give him some of these rooibos leaves as a tea to boost the effect of his natural healing. Thank you, Henrietta, I said. But she was already packing up her things to leave. Yes, Cher. Roman seemed to recognize you. I looked over at him, now breathing steadily. He looked fast asleep. Do you two know each other? She avoided making eye contact. Not really. Maybe in another life. But that's not important now. She walked towards the door. I will place a ring of protection around the house. It should last long enough for Roman to regain his strength. I'll come and check his wound again before I leave. She walked outside to begin her spell of protection. My phone vibrated. I looked down at it to see a text from Florence that read, I can't believe you left before giving us details. It buzzed again. Hey, have you seen Bridget today? I quickly replied with, no, I haven't. Figured she was working. I brewed the leaves and woke Roman to drink it. The tea seemed to help and he fell into a deeper sleep after finishing it. 20 minutes later, Florence texted me again. I'm getting worried. She didn't show up for her shift. That's not like her. No one's seen or heard from her today. I checked on Roman. His complexion had returned to normal and his breathing was smooth and even. Satisfied that he was improving, I started to worry about my roommate. I decided to text Bridget. Hey, I hear you're MIA, Bridge. Where you at, girl? To my surprise, I received a text back from Bridget less than a minute later. Only it wasn't Bridget. The text had come from Bridget's phone, but instead of her reply, two pictures appeared. They were sent back to back and were photos of Bridget, tied up, bound and gagged with mascara-laden tears streaking down her face. What the? I only had 10 seconds to process what I was looking at before my phone rang. It was a call from Bridget's phone. My heart stopped, frozen in fear unlike ever before. I answered it. Hello. There was silence for a few seconds, and then a deep male voice came over the phone. Good evening, Isabella. Did you get my texts? Who is this? I asked him. This is Damien Bellefontaine. Tell Roman he will pay for what he did to my pack. If you want your friend to live, you will listen to me very carefully. Is that understood? Yes, I said, clearing my throat. What have you done to her? Nothing permanent, said Damien. Not yet. I looked over at Roman. His chest rose and fell evenly. I'll do whatever you want, just let Bridget go. You are going to meet us alone, he said. Isabella. I heard Bridget cry from somewhere in the background. It's a trap, don't come. He slapped her and she cut off with a whimper. Roman began to stir. I couldn't tell him about this. I had to handle it myself, otherwise he might try to help before he was healed, and get himself killed. Sorry for the interruption, Damien said. Breaux Bridge is my city. Everything and everyone in it belongs to me. I call the shots. Meet me tonight at midnight on the Crocodile Bayou Bridge. It's called Pontoon Bridge. Come. Alone. I'll be there, I said. I assume Roman is still alive, so not a word of this to him, said Damien. If he comes anywhere near the bridge, I'll pick up his scent and your friend will be dead. Damien hung up. Roman opened his eyes. I heard every word. You're not going. He rose slowly and rolled his neck, the newly healed skin still pink and tender. A long scar wrapped from the side of his Adam's apple down towards his chest. We can't leave Bridget, and Damien will know if you are there, I said. Absolutely not, Isabella. If you go, he will just grab you too. You don't think I know that? I helped him gain his feet. I might have an idea. I filled Roman in on the gree-gree and my training with the crossbow. The beginnings of a plan began to form in my mind and I shared it with him. Roman wasn't convinced. There is no way I am letting you put yourself in that kind of danger. Back on your feet, I see, said Henrietta as she came back in. She read the fear on my face. What has happened? Henrietta didn't seem surprised to learn Damien had kidnapped Bridget. That one's evil. His mother must curse the day he was born. Will you help us? Roman asked. She looked at Roman with cold eyes. I won't do it for you, but I will. Consider it for Isabella and my mother's sake. Your mother? I asked. You asked if we knew each other, said Henrietta. My mother and Roman were lovers a long time ago. I have her memories of him. Then you remember what Colette meant to me, said Roman. I gasped. You aren't his daughter, are you? Henrietta scoffed. No share. He left before there was time for that. She looked at Roman. I also remember how you abandoned her when she needed you most. I had no choice, Roman scowled. We don't have time for this right now. Will you help us or not? I was just beginning to enjoy my quiet life, she sighed. Yes, I will help. You. Damien is no fool, said Roman. He will be expecting an attack. His pack will be with him. Leave them to me, smiled Henrietta. I hugged her. Thank you. I'm still coming with you, said Roman. Can we hide his scent from Damien? I asked. I can try, Henrietta said. But the Rougarou's sense of smell is powerful. She clacked her nails together in thought and turned to Roman. How long can you hold your breath? We finalized our plans and Henrietta left us alone to make her own preparations. Roman and I spent the next hour together naked in his bed, just holding each other. I lay with my head on his chest, his arms wrapped tightly around me. We fit together perfectly. Nothing in my life ever felt as right as when we cuddled together. This might be the last time we ever see each other, I said. Don't talk that way, Roman said. Everything will be all right. His words sounded confident, but I could see the worry in his eyes. I tried to change the subject. Tell me how you were turned. Roman was silent for a few seconds. I was trapping in the bayou with a few close friends. These were guys I had grown up with my whole life, he said. I had been seeing Henrietta's mother for a while. I told my friends that Colette was the one, that I was going to marry her. They took me camping to celebrate. You loved her? I asked. Once, he said. But that was a long time ago. The Rougarou was hunting in the bayou that night? I asked. Roman nodded. The bayou was our home. Ain't nothing out here but a few old gators, my friend Laurent would say. We all got drunk that night. We talked about old stories and what the future would hold for us all. We were so naive. Back then. Never even saw the attack coming. I lifted my head and kissed the scar on his neck. Roman continued. The Rougarou killed everyone but me. I thought I was dead, too. It had bitten me twice and slashed me across the stomach with his claws. I remember trying to hold in my intestines as I lay still, praying it would go away. It finally did, leaving me to bleed out alone. I traced my fingertips across the faded scar on his stomach. If it wasn't for my residency in the medical surgery unit, Roman cut off and closed his eyes. I survived long enough for the virus to begin healing my body. It made me so sad that he had gone through that terrifying experience. I could tell it was still painful for him to tell me about it. That's awful. You lost your friends, I said. I lost everything. My life changed from that point on. Roman hugged me tighter. His face looked strained. I dragged myself out through the mud inch by inch. A hunter found me and was able to get me to the hospital in time. Healed faster than the doctors could believe. They wanted to keep me for observation, to study me. That's when I got an unexpected visitor. Didn't your family come to help you? I asked. No, said Roman sadly. Both my parents had passed by then. My mother died of pancreatic cancer and my father from a brain tumor. That's the reason I went into medicine in the first place. I thought I could find a cure before I developed one or the other. Instead, a cure found me. Then who came to visit you? I asked. A strange Frenchman I had never seen before. He wouldn't tell me his name at first. He warned me what would happen when the full moon came. Told me I should leave town. I didn't believe him. I took Roman's hand in mine. I didn't believe you at first either. Then he transformed in front of me. Roman's eyes burned hot with the memory. I was still a little confused about how all this worked. I thought you could only transform during the full moon. Roman cracked a sarcastic grin. A common myth. Since I learned to control it, I can now trigger the change at will. His smile faded, just like my visitor did that night. It was the same creature from the bayou. I thought for sure he had come to finish me off. Why didn't he? I asked. He followed some strange code about never killing his own kind. Roman shook his head as if to drive the thoughts from it. By the time he changed back into his human form, I realized that I had to leave town. And you left just like that? I asked. I was scared, said Roman. I had just seen my friends killed in front of me. I was grappling with the fact that I had become a monster. Couldn't risk doing that to anyone else. Wouldn't take the chance of hurting Colette. I tried not to feel jealous. Do you wish now that you had stayed? I was far away the first time I changed. I thought I had hiked deep enough into the forest so that no one would be around, but I still killed a forest ranger that night. It's haunted me ever since, and I rededicated my life from that point on to saving others. Roman rolled to his side, looking me in the eyes with intensity. I cared for Colette, but leaving was the best thing to do. A newly turned pup is more animal than man. I am in control of it now. After decades of stilling my rage and hunger at the patient's bedside, I took his beautiful face in my hands, afraid to ask the question. Is that how you feel about me? Roman put his arms around my neck. This is completely different. Feel the mate bond with you, Isabella. I will do anything to protect you, and I will not leave your side unless you send me away. Even if you send me away, I will still be with you. I love you. Did he just say that? He did. I could barely process it all. A rush of emotion flooded my brain. I had waited, hoped for this moment, not knowing if it would ever come. I love you too, Roman. When you go to that bridge tomorrow, I will be there too, he promised. I will stay as close as possible to still avoid detection by Damien or his mongrels. You are not going to die. I swear it on my life. I kissed his lips softly. They were warm and welcoming. He caressed my waist and pulled me closer. I no longer knew where my body ended and his began. We made love more than once that night. I was able to get a few hours of sleep before Roman finally woke me with a kiss. It's time. Chapter 13. Crocodile Bridge. We had gone over the plan a dozen times, but no matter how many times we reviewed it, I could still sense a feeling of dread growing in my gut. I was going to have to face Damien by myself. Henrietta and Roman would be close by, but Bridget's life depended on me alone. The moon was just barely visible, coming in and out of view as gray clouds swirled menacingly around it. It wasn't yet full, but that wouldn't stop Damien from transforming at will. I reached under my jacket, reassured by the metallic feel of Sylvia and the exploding silver-tipped bolts. In its collapsed configuration, the crossbow would pass as a strange wrinkle in the fabric of my clothes. I wore the gree and the blue healing vial that Henrietta had given me around my neck. Somewhere to my left, Henrietta was moving through the trees under a spell of unsight. Would she be able to find Gautier and Matthias and deal with them without alerting Damien? Unlike the bridge that the town was named for, Pontoon Bridge was a small lift bridge barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass each other. It was the only way. Across the La Rose Bayou, which Roman said was almost 250 feet across. The locals called this sparsely populated section the Crocodile Bayou. There weren't any crocodiles in Louisiana, but these waters were crawling with gators. I could see Damien waiting in the center of the bridge ahead, dimly lit by a flickering light post. Bridget was bound by her arms and legs and on her knees cowering in front of him. He held her by her hair. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the bridge, beginning the long walk towards the center. As I got closer, I was relieved to see that she was still alive. Black rivers of mascara-filled tears streaked down her cheeks, highlighting the swollen bruises on her face. I stopped walking as soon as Damien entered my range of accuracy with the crossbow. He was just about at the same distance away as the hay targets, behind Henrietta's shop, and I imagined putting a bolt through his chest. "You bastard! What did you do to her?" I yelled. "You should thank me for saving her from my pack." Damien flashed his teeth. They would have done much worse had I not held them back. It took every ounce of restraint I had to not draw the crossbow and fire at him. But I couldn't risk harming Bridget, so I simply dug my nails into my hand instead. "I'm here, now let her go," I demanded. "I keep my word," said Damien. "But shouldn't we take a moment to admire the irony of this whole situation?" "What irony?" I asked. Damien laughed. "That your friend Bridget is tied up on a bridge." "You what a creep." I tried not to gag. "I've done what you said. It's time for you to keep your part and release her." "Have you though?" Damien said as he looked around suspiciously. "I'll untie her, but you will take her place." Bridget went pale and started shaking her head, struggling to be heard over the gag in her mouth. Damien slapped her in the back of the head. "That's enough of that." "Stop," I screamed. "I'll do what you want. Just don't hurt her." Damien untied her ankles and hefted her by her hair onto her feet. She ran towards me with wrists still bound and tears in her eyes. I caught her in my arms as she nearly collapsed. Damien looked on remorselessly as I removed the gag from her mouth. "Isabella, you can't go with him," she said with a raw voice. I used my sleeve to wipe some of the grime from her face. "It's okay, Bridget. He was after me all along." "Isabella, I tried to warn you not to come." "I know you did. None of this is your fault. Just go, Bridget," I insisted. She was reluctant to abandon me, but I could feel the fear rolling off her in waves. I saw in the haunted look behind her eyes that she had endured too much already. She didn't want to die. Bridget gave one shuddering look towards Damien and made up her mind. "I'm sorry, Isabella." Then she was moving towards the bank in freedom. I didn't blame her. They had pushed her past the breaking point to get to me. I thought about running, but the sight of Damien's eye twitching as he watched me cemented my feet in place. If I ran now, he would kill us both. I widened my stance and folded my arms. I wasn't going anywhere, not until Bridget was safe on shore. "You are brave," said Damien. "I am beginning to understand what Roman sees in you." He took a step closer. "Tell me what you want with me," I demanded. I had to keep him talking until Bridget got away. "Our power is growing," he said with a smirk. "The pack has influence and control in this town. Managing it properly is spreading us thin. It is time for some new blood." "You can't mean." "Exactly." He clapped his hands in excitement. "I've given up on Roman. If he won't join, then perhaps you will." "Never," I yelled. He snarled. "Think carefully. Join the pack, become my mate, and we will let Roman live." The sick feeling rose again in my throat. And if I refuse? Just the thought of touching this monster made me want to hurl. A scream caused me to spin around. Matthias had appeared from the trees to grab a hold of Bridget just as she stepped off the bridge. Damien began laughing. I whirled to face him, reaching beneath my jacket to grasp the crossbow hidden there. "You said you would let her go." "And I did." Long fangs grew as he opened his mouth wider. "A shame that." Matthias caught her again. Loud splashing in the water below the bridge drew everyone's attention. "Looks like the gators got something big," Matthias said as he turned to look. "Roman." Henrietta's plan called for him to swim under the water to hide his scent from Damien. Could he fight off a gator? I wanted to help him, but there was nothing I could do from here. From the cover of a cypress grove, I strained my werewolf eyesight to see the tiny figures on the bridge. I was downwind and far enough away to be out of range of Damien's powerful nose. I could just make out Isabella and Damien's faces. She was talking to him, stalling as we had planned. I have to help her. I broke cover and moved quickly towards the water's edge. Suddenly I heard something behind me. I turned back towards the trees. Gautier. How had he gotten behind me? He raised his head to sound the alarm, only to fall limply to the ground. Panic filled his eyes as he struggled silently to move. But he was completely paralyzed. What is wrong with him? That's when Henrietta stepped from the trees. She raised a small voodoo doll in the air and shook it. It was made in Gautier's likeness and had a piece of his clothing pinned to it. Henrietta must have retrieved it after our fight. I waved to her in thanks, glad to have the woman on my side. I got this, wolf doctor, she said. Now into the muddy water with you. I hope you can handle Matthias alone, I said. She picked up a fallen tree limb and broke it over the head of the prone Gautier, knocking him unconscious. Never mind, I said. Matthias has no chance. I looked down at the murky water of Crocodile Bayou. A small splash marked the spot where a juvenile alligator sank below the waterline. There was no telling how many swam beneath the surface. I took off my shirt and kicked off my shoes. They would only slow me down. Breathing in and out slowly, I conditioned my lungs for the nearly quarter-mile swim underwater. I had to try and do it in one breath. Surfacing at any point before reaching the bridge could alert Damien to my presence. Damien untied his prisoner and motioned to Isabella. No time to waste. I waded carefully into the brown water. No gator seemed to be swimming in this area. I dove under. My skin felt cool as I began to swim, a welcomed break from the sticky humidity in the air. There was only a few feet of visibility in front of me. I hoped that meant I would be hard to spot by any gators in turn. I swam only as quickly as I dared, trying to keep from making any large splashes. A few of the smaller reptiles darted away as I passed them in the water. They were more afraid of me than I was of them. What concerned me was coming across a full-grown male in the water. Some grew as large as 13 feet in length and weighed over 500 pounds. I'd rather pass through the territory of a killing machine like that unseen. I'd suffered a bite from the massive jaws of one before. That time I had been able to kill the animal, but that was because it was on land. The water was their domain. I had seen what a gator could do to prey in the water, ripping off large chunks of flesh as they spun into the death roll. As I continued on towards the bridge, I marveled at the assortment of brownish-yellow flathead catfish and muddy red crawfish swimming beneath me. My lungs began to burn from the strain of holding my breath for so long, but I ignored the pain for now. My ability to heal allowed my organs to go much longer without oxygen than that of a human swimmer. But even I had my limits. I tried to ignore the thought of drowning. I must be nearly halfway there by now. Something large bumped my legs. I surfaced out of surprise and looked around. Nothing. I glanced in the direction I had been heading. The bridge was still about 100 yards away. No one seemed to notice my emergence, so I quickly sank back underwater and continued my swim. This was taking too long. Isabella needed me. Reinvigorated by the breath of air, I pushed myself to my limits and covered most of the remaining distance in a time worthy of an Olympic athlete. That's when a huge gator hit me. I jerked to the side just in time to avoid the powerful jaws from clamping down on my arm, but the incredible bulk of its maw still smashed into me. A row of pointed white teeth glistened in the water as the reptile tried for another bite. This time I dropped down beneath it, swimming to the shallow bottom and exploding upwards with a heave of my legs. The giant gator turned in the water. To avoid the impact, I too changed direction, avoiding the jaws and grabbing its thick neck before pulling it into a wrestler's hold from below. The gator thrashed wildly as it struggled to escape. I punched it once in the side, but its thick hide might as well have been armor. The gator struck me with its meaty tail, the blow dazing me for a moment. It swam lower, trying to drown me, as its weight bore us to the bottom. Recovering, I delivered a blow from my knee to its exposed belly. The reptile squirmed in pain and responded by spinning into a death roll. I held on with every ounce of strength I had as I tried to turn into the roll. My arms and legs smashed into rocks and sunken logs as I struggled to hang on. The gator's Claws struck at my head, staggering me so I no longer knew up from down. I lost my hold. The exhausted animal swam away. It was over as suddenly as it had begun. Don't tell me Roman was stupid enough to swim in there. Damien turned his gaze to the dark water below. He shook his head. All this time spent living in the swamp, only to be ripped apart by gators. No, it couldn't be true. I thought about jumping into the water to try and help him, but I would just be gator food. I glanced back at Matthias and saw Henrietta creeping up behind him. Now was my chance. Damien will pay. I drew Sylvia, straightening the barrel and unfurling the limbs of the bowstave in one fluid motion. I loaded a bolt as I cranked it into position. With my foot on the stirrup, Damien's head snapped back towards me at the sound and I aimed at his heart. I fired, but he was already moving. The bolt struck him in the arm, the silver head exploding on impact and sending silver shards into the limb. Damien roared in pain, slamming into me. As the momentum of his charge continued to propel him forward, Sylvia spun out of my grip as I fell, sliding across the surface of the bridge. Damien rolled away, writhing in agony as his skin sizzled. The silver was cooking the flesh of his arm from the inside out. Another scream came from where Matthias held Bridget. I risked a glance their way. The cry hadn't come from Bridget, though. Henrietta had taken Matthias by surprise, dumping the contents of a black vial onto him. The dark liquid spread like smoky tar over his head, blinding his eyes and covering his entire face. He released his hold and struggled to make it to the water's edge, to dunk himself clean. Bridget fell away, some of the liquid falling on her back and shoulders and burning it. Henrietta rushed to her aid, preparing a powder casting to clean away the vile fluid and heal the damage to her skin. I had twisted my ankle, but still struggled to my feet to retrieve the crossbow. Damien kicked it off the edge of the bridge and into the water below. He was back on his feet already. The nails of his right hand had grown into long claws and he used them to dig into his blackened left arm, pulling out steaming pieces of silver one at a time. That was very stupid, he growled. I would have made you my equal as my mate. Now you will join my pack as an omega breeding bitch and I will kill everyone that you have ever cared for. I tried to run, but he grabbed my arm, digging into my skin with his sharp claws. He lowered his mouth and pierced my neck with his fangs as he bit me. Roman exploded from the water, landing on the bridge and ripping Damien off of me. I cried out as his teeth tore open my flesh. My blood spattered on the ground. The cord around my neck snapped and the gree and blue healing vial fell and began to roll away across the bridge. I could almost feel the virus spreading like poison through my blood. The blue vial. I needed it to kill the virus and stay human. Then I paused. Roman had beaten the gator. Roman's alive. I knew it would take more than that to stop him. He and Damien rushed each other. I looked back towards Henrietta. Matthias had washed away enough of the black liquid to focus his gaze on her as she tried to heal Bridget. Henrietta, watch out! I called as he attacked. She threw up a cloud of powder and both her and Bridget vanished. The spell of unsight pulled myself up to a sitting position as Roman and Damien raged against each other. On the bridge, Damien had his claws and fangs out while remaining in human form and he used them to inflict devastating cuts across Roman's chest. I could see that Roman was drained from his difficult swim and whatever else had happened to him beneath the water, but he was still the stronger of the two combatants, flinging Damien back and then attacking him from the side with the blackened arm. Roman accepted the damage that Damien's claws caused, relying on his healing powers as he knocked the feet of his enemy out from beneath him. Roman raised his leg to stomp on Damien's exposed throat. Damien rolled away, struggling to rise as Roman charged after him. Roman threw his arms wide and lowered his shoulder in a tackle that smashed Damien's head against a side post at the edge of the bridge. I tried to crawl over towards the healing potion, but I had lost too much blood and collapsed. I turned my head towards Roman. Roman, stop! Damien commanded. Your mate is gushing her life force out all over this wretched bridge. Let us delay this fight for another time. My bite will eventually heal her, but only if you stop the bleeding. The rage on Roman's face faded to fear. The look in his eyes told me the truth. I would die if he didn't do something now. Another time then. Roman ran to my side, pressing the fabric of my jacket tightly against the wound. Isabella, are you okay? I smiled weakly. Better now. Damien slithered away, collecting a confused Matthias who was still searching for the two invisible women. We will see you very soon, Roman. You and your new pup. His laughter trailed off as they went to look for Gautier. I'm sorry I took so long to get to you, Roman said as he held me tightly. Please hold on for a little while more, and the virus will heal you. I could barely stay awake. I wouldn't last long. Not even a gator could stop. You. It's not your fault. I've lost too much blood. Kiss me one last time. Roman leaned in and pressed his lips to mine. They were muddy and smelled of swamp water. Still, it was the sweetest kiss I had ever had. Are you two about finished with your dramatic moment? Henrietta held out the blue healing vial, her face a mix of concern and annoyance. In her other hand, she held Sylvia, the crossbow retrieved from its muddy swim in the bayou. Chapter 14. St. Martin's. Instead of asking Henrietta the dozens of questions that flew through my mind about what exactly was in this healing potion of hers, I decided to trust her. I helped Isabella swallow the liquid, with the help of another powder casting. The bite in her neck closed and the pale look on Isabella's face faded. She seemed to have recovered some of her strength, but she had still lost a great deal of blood. It had helped to heal her, but I was still not convinced that the potion could stop the spread of the virus. I looked over my shoulder to see the first rays of light cresting the ridge. Picked up Isabella in my arms and carried her as the other two women walked with me to my car. It was a bit of a squeeze to fit everyone in my black Mustang, but we managed to make it to the hospital. Bridget's wounds needed tending. It was morning, but tonight would bring the full moon. No one would take me from Isabella's side until I was sure she had fully recovered and would not transform. As we exited the car, I saw that it was still early enough to avoid much notice by entering St. Martin's through the employee entrance. Henrietta did get some strange looks though. Thank God you found her, said Florence from behind her desk as we entered. Bridget, you should try answering your phone. Are you okay? Florence noticed the bruises on Bridget's face and the blood on our clothes. A minor car accident, I said. They're a little shaken up, but okay. Please reserve room 12 for us. I'll treat Isabella and Bridget personally. Of course, Dr. Roman. I'll take care of everything, said Florence. I can't leave my station, but I'll check on you as soon as my shift is over. I'm just glad it wasn't worse. Isabella reached over and squeezed Florence's hand. Thank you, Florence. Anytime, Cher, she said. I owe you one for finding her. Henrietta wandered off in the direction of the vending machines. Of all of us, she alone seemed unaffected by the fight in the bayou. Her clothes weren't even ripped. My shirt had several bloody gashes, so I quickly changed into a fresh pair of scrubs. There were 2 beds in room 12 and Bridget was more than happy to collapse into one of them. Isabella, however, was another story. I told you, Roman, I'm fine, she insisted. I almost lost you back there, I said softly. You can help me with Bridget once I give you a full examination and clear you to return to duty. She sighed. Fine. I took her hand and kissed it. There's still a chance the virus will turn. You. I don't mean to doubt Henrietta, but I'm not taking any chances with the woman I love. Isabella finally relented, changing into a hospital gown and allowing me to help her into the bed across from Bridget, who was already fast asleep and snoring softly. I took a vial of her blood and sent it straight to the lab for analysis under a confidential sticker. Then I went through a full workup with her despite just wanting to hold her in my arms. All of my tests came back clean. The only thing remaining was the lab results. Why don't you get some rest? I asked Isabella, kissing her forehead. That doesn't sound like a bad idea, she said. Will you lie down with me? As good as that sounded, I was too worried to stay still. In a minute. Let me just check on the blood work. Will you and Bridget be okay alone for a minute? Yes, fine. She closed her eyes and began breathing evenly. She looked so peaceful in the moments right before sleep took her. On the way to the lab, I ran into Henrietta, her arms full of several half-eaten bags of chips. What? She asked, seeing the judgmental look on my face. I saved you all. Some see. I pulled her aside. Henrietta, I can't ever thank you enough for what you've done. She handed me a salt and vinegar flavored bag. Thanks, those are my favorite. My reserves were low, and I quickly downed the entire thing. Henrietta laughed. I remember. You never did have any table manners. Henrietta. Isabella told me that you have your mother's memories. The resemblance to her mother was uncanny. She was the same age Colette had been. Before I ran away. She had the same exotic face, the same long legs. It wasn't right what I did to her. I always wanted to tell her that I was sorry. The bags of chips she held fell to the floor. It wasn't all bad memories. She raised her hand to my face. They seem so much like my own. I remember the taste of your lips, the feel of my body against yours. Henrietta, Shua. She shushed me and moved her thumb to my lips. She never got to kiss you goodbye. I shouldn't have allowed it, but my blood was still hot from the fight on the bridge. In that moment, all of the images and memories of what Colette and I shared together came flooding back in a rush. She kissed me full and deep on the lips, and I kissed her back. Roman, came a shocked whisper from the other end of the hall. I pulled back too late. There stood Isabella, her hospital gown partially open to the side, wearing only one sock. She had seen us kissing. Isabella. It didn't mean anything, I didn't mean to. I looked back to Henrietta for help, but she had already fled. Isabella was furious. Bridget warned me about you. I ignored what everyone said. I thought they were wrong. Now I see that I've been a fool. I rushed over and tried to take her hand, but she swatted it away. Don't touch me. What an idiot I was. It's not what you think. With Henrietta? How could you, Roman? She was my friend. This was all going wrong. You're the one I want to be with, she said. Her mother never got to say goodbye. She folded her arms. So you still have feelings for her? No, I did, but tears started to fall down her cheek. Then you just can't control yourself? She sure spun that around. I'm sorry, Isabella. You have to believe me. She started backing away. I don't have to do anything. You're sick, Henrietta. Might as well be your own daughter. That thought struck me hardest of all. I didn't follow Isabella as she ran back to her room. What have I done? Later that night, I knocked on the door to room 12 with the lab results in hand. She doesn't want to see you, came the response. I pushed open the door anyways to find Bridget consoling Isabella in her bed. A look of death from Bridget confirmed she knew what happened between Henrietta and I. Isabella wouldn't even raise her eyes to look at me. I cleared my throat. The lab results came back clear. There is no trace of the virus in your blood. I thought you should know. Bridget shot me an icy glare. Thank you, doctor. You can wait outside. I put a new chain on your gree-gree, I said as I placed the amulet on the table. I'll be close by if you need anything, I said sheepishly. I hope you can forgive what I've done. We'll keep the secret of what you are, said Bridget. But you don't deserve anything else. I'll stay with her through the full moon. Now please, leave us alone. I checked on a few other patients to pass the time, going out of my way to walk by the closed door of room 12 as frequently as possible. This time I overheard the two nurses talking quietly together in harsh whispers. Maybe he's telling the truth. Like all the other times? I want to believe him. I know, Cher. Despite everything that's happened, I do too. He probably didn't do it on purpose, he just can't keep it in his pants. I did my best not to eavesdrop further. I looked out the window. As the white orb of the full moon ascended into the sky, I breathed a sigh of relief. At least Isabella wouldn't have to live through that nightmare. Perhaps in time I could win her back. Henrietta tapped me on the shoulder. Roman, we have a problem. You're damned right we do. I spun around. What was with that kiss? Not that problem, she said with a blush. The pack is coming. What? I demanded. She rolled her eyes. I've foreseen it. They are coming, in their werewolf forms. They'll kill everyone in the hospital if we don't stop them. My breath caught. They wouldn't dare attack such a public place in force. There were security cameras everywhere. We've got to evacuate the patients. She shook her head. We don't have time for that. They'll be here in minutes. I ran to Florence's desk. Florence, we have a code silver. Someone has a weapon, she asked in shock. What's going on? Lock everything down. Now. I ran back to room 12 as the alarm sounded. Bridget was already on her way out into the hallway. What's happening? I looked through the doorway to see Isabella quickly dressing. The pack is attacking the hospital. I need the two of you to lock all the patients in their rooms. What are you going to do? Asked Bridget. I have to try and stop them, I said. Isabella grabbed the gree-gree from the table. You're not fighting them. Alone. He won't be alone. Henrietta held out the silver crossbow for her to take. She had cleaned and reloaded it. Bridget ran to secure the patient rooms as the three of us headed towards the front entrance. After we were outside, I locked the door behind us. A single howl shattered the night. Two more responded in unison. You may want to stand back, I said, removing my coat and sliding off my shirt. The change always came quicker during a full moon. The fur of my werewolf form practically shot out of my skin as my bones cracked and elongated. I had hoped to spare Isabella from ever seeing this, but there was nothing to do to prevent that now. Both women watched in curiosity as the skin of my face stretched to fit my growing jaw. Isabella put her hand to her mouth as my teeth grew into long fangs and my face changed into the muzzle of a wolf. Henrietta seemed mostly concerned with what was happening to my nether region, so I covered the area with a clawed hand until the rest of my fur filled in. I shook my head with a growl as my chest and arms bulged with rippling muscles. The pain of the transformation was nothing compared to my need to protect Isabella and everyone else in the hospital. This was my territory and I would defend it to the death. Chapter 15. The Pack. My mind was a jumble of warring emotions. I had almost died in Roman's arms, only to catch him kissing what I had thought was my best friend. Now not only was I watching the man I both loved and currently hated change into a werewolf, but the hospital was about to be attacked by three more. I slipped the gree-gree over my neck. Roman had put it on a silver chain. Does that mean he can touch silver but just can't get it in his bloodstream? Couldn't think about that now. I readied my crossbow and glanced over at Henrietta. That slut, who was I kidding? I owed her my life. If she made Roman happy, should I just let her have him? No, I wouldn't let her or anyone else take him from me. Not without a fight. What I assumed was Damien emerged from the woods first. His steaming fur was black and sickly looking. I wondered if that was an effect of the silver. The injured arm seemed to have fully healed. He was just as large as Roman, but not the same healthy brown shade of fur. Gautier and Matthias followed close behind their leader. Gautier was shorter than Matthias, so he must be the smaller gray werewolf. Matthias was nearly the same size as Damien with reddish-brown fur. They all seemed hideous in comparison to Roman. He definitely made the cutest werewolf. Roman growled deep in his throat. Cute but deadly. The other three werewolves gave their own guttural growls in answer and fanned out. I'll take the red one, said Henrietta. I raised my crossbow. The gray one's mine. Roman locked his eyes on the black werewolf in the center. He fell to all fours and ran forward at high speed. The other werewolves were already charging as I fired a bolt at Gautier. My shot flew high and it exploded as it impacted a lamp post above his head. Gautier shied away from the silver fragments completely unharmed. Shit! I cursed as I grabbed for another bolt. A ball of fire appeared in Henrietta's hand. A second later it was streaking towards Matthias. The reddish-brown werewolf ducked under the attack and it set a cypress tree aflame. Roman and Damien crashed together, rearing up on their hind legs as they spun in a deadly dance of lathered jaws and slashing claws. I struggled to reload as Gautier closed the distance between us. I fired and hit his flank, but with a regular silver arrow, not an exploding bolt. I must have loaded the wrong kind. He yelped in pain and his leg began to sizzle. Then his jaws closed around the arrow and easily pulled it out. Gautier bared his teeth at me in a rumbling snarl. Henrietta had run out to the side, throwing several more fireballs. One had struck Matthias in the chest and he was now rolling on the ground in an attempt to extinguish it. She moved in for the kill, ignorant to the look of panic on my face. Gautier leaped at me as I closed my hand around the gree-gree. I rolled to the side and he smashed into the window behind me. It shattered and the werewolf fell to the ground. He recovered quickly, shaking free the shattered glass. With a whimper, he shook his head as if confused. He didn't seem to see me, even though I was on the ground right in front of him. The gree-gree, it was working. I slid to the side and began reloading the crossbow. This time I made sure to load the correct exploding bolt. The jaws turned my way at the sound, dripping with drool. Gautier's eyes were unfocused, but he still snapped in my direction. A disoriented wolf was still dangerous. I cranked the crossbow. stood up and fired directly between his eyes. The bolt pierced his skull and exploded, sending shards of silver into Gautier's brain, killing him instantly. I turned back to see a still flaming Matthias on top of Henrietta. She had underestimated him. He raised his massive paw to slice open her neck and was thrown off as Roman hurled Damien through the air to smash into him. Henrietta looked badly injured and didn't rise. As she lost consciousness, the fire on Matthias' fur coat winked out. Roman barreled into the two other werewolves, trying to put a quick end to the fight. He had bested Damien, but now he was facing two opponents by himself. Reloaded my crossbow and took aim. Then I stopped. I can't risk hitting Roman. I watched in terror as Matthias and Damien used their advantage to deal devastating blows against Roman. His attention divided, their jaws carved out huge chunks of his flesh and their claws sliced bleeding rivers of blood across his legs and chest. Roman inflicted some damage of his own, but they were backing him against the wall. A vicious bite to his hind leg left him limping. He was losing. Damien and Matthias went in for the kill and turned their backs to me. I still couldn't shoot from here, but I could still help Roman, even if it cost me my life. Forgetting everything else, I grasped an exploding bolt in each hand and charged them. They were so focused on their lust for Roman's blood, Matthias didn't notice me until I plunged both bolts into the side of his hairy rib cage. I screamed as the explosion burned me and sent shards of silver into my hands, but they also cut into Matthias, slicing through the gaps between his bones and into his heart. He died with a too-human scream as his body blackened and cooked. Damien turned his head in surprise for only a second. That moment of weakness was all that Roman needed. He launched himself at the black werewolf, sinking his jaws deep into the exposed neck. I rolled away as Roman bore him down, thrashing to the ground, holding tight on the jugular as he cut off the circulation of blood in Damien's body. With a howl of victory, Roman ripped out Damien's throat and crushed his skull, inflicting far too much damage to be healed. The bloody muzzle and teeth turned my way, but I knew he would never harm me. Roman, I forgive you, I said, just before I blacked out from the pain. They told me later that Roman had spent nearly 80 hours in surgery, repairing the nerve damage to my hands. He didn't eat or sleep once, but worked straight through. Roman didn't even stop to use the bathroom, he just directed a nurse to connect a catheter to him while he worked. He refused when the other surgeons tried to relieve him and take over. I am the only one who can repair the damage, he had said, and continued working. The longest surgery on record had only lasted for 12 hours more, and it had been performed by a team of 4 surgeons working in shifts. Roman did it all on his own. They called it a miracle, but I knew he had used just enough of his saliva to regrow the joints and tendons. It had taken all of his medical knowledge and skill, along with the maximum safe amount of the virus, to rejoin my nerves and muscles, all the while balancing the strength of my immune system in perfect harmony. Roman wouldn't let the virus take control. He wouldn't let anything hurt me. I awoke in my hospital bed with my hands bandaged. Roman slept in a chair at my side, the thick stubble on his face threatening to become a beard. I had never seen him look so exhausted. I carefully unwound the gauze on my right hand. There were faint scars on the underside of each finger, but the skin was pink and healthy. I flexed my hand carefully. There was good sensation and only a little pain. I needed to touch Roman. I extended my hand towards him. His eyes fluttered open and he was instantly by my side. You're finally awake, he said with a smile. Taking my hand in his, he kissed each fingertip. Can you feel that? He asked. Good as new, I smiled, pulling him in closer. Thank you, doctor. He sighed in relief. After you saved my life, the least I could do was to save your hands. Even if you hadn't, I whispered. Just trying would have been enough. Could have lived without the use of my hands, but not without kissing you. Again. A tear fell from his eye, salting his lips as Roman leaned in to kiss me. There was a promise in that kiss, along with passion and love in the ones that followed. Chapter 2. Epilogue. Spring came to the bayou and the trees and plants greeted it with a full bloom of flowers. A small cleaning project had turned into a larger remodeling of Roman's house, though he refused to part with his leather furniture. At least he'd given me free rein in selecting new paint colors. With my residency Completed. I spent most of my time studying for the Louisiana RN license. Still picked up an occasional shift with Roman at St. Martin's, though much of his time was now spent in complex surgical procedures. Whether we were working on the night or day shift, we always cooked together after work and then made love like a pair of cottontail marsh rabbits. We were enjoying the sunset together one evening with a pitcher of sweet raspberry tea when Roman suddenly set his glass down. "Someone's coming," he said. I would never get used to his enhanced hearing and sense of smell. A moment later, a middle-aged man wearing a full-length coat strolled down the driveway. He had a full head of gray blonde hair and a long scar that ran from his ear to his square chin. "It's been a long time, Roman," said the stranger. "Not long enough, Jean-Luc," replied Roman. "You should introduce me to your lady friend," said Jean-Luc. Roman scowled. "Isabella Devon, meet Jean-Luc Girard." He smiled. "Bonjour. Un plaisir de vous rencontrer, mademoiselle." That seemed a polite enough greeting. "Merci," I replied with what little French I had at my disposal. Roman was frowning, his muscles tight and defensive. He wasn't pleased to see Jean-Luc. "Roman, how do you know this man?" I asked. Roman didn't answer me. "I think you should leave, Jean-Luc." "Tisk tsk, Roman. Not even an offer of refreshment? You never did learn any manners." Roman put his arm around me protectively. "This is the rougarou that bit and turned me." Now I understood why Roman was so agitated. This creature had killed his friends and turned him into a werewolf. This was the man responsible for forcing him to leave everything he had loved behind or risk destroying it. That had been over 30 years ago. What was he doing back here? "What do you want?" Roman asked him. Jean-Luc shook his head slowly. "I tried to protect you, Roman, but you have broken the old laws far too many times. I can no longer shield your actions from the council." "What council?" I asked. "It's a group of rougarou alphas," Roman replied. "They are the oldest and strongest of our kind, and the most dangerous." Jean-Luc looked down at his hand, his nails repeatedly growing into long claws and then shrinking back to normal human. "Once I warned you this would happen. They have commanded me to bring you and your human mate before them for questioning and judgment." Roman stepped in front of me, the rage building strength in his arms and legs. "That's not going to happen." Jean-Luc laughed. "Predictable as always. I hoped you would want to do this the hard way." Roman stepped forward with a growl. "I'm no longer a pup, Jean-Luc. I have no problem adding another kill to these so-called crimes." Jean-Luc removed his coat with a flourish, laying it carefully down on the trunk of Roman's black Mustang. "You have grown strong, it's true. Maybe even stronger than me. That's why I brought help." He whistled and 3 men along with 2 women stepped out from the trees in unison. Roman paused to consider the newcomers as they spread out in a semicircle around him. Even if I had my crossbow with me, we were still hopelessly outnumbered. "Very well," Roman said. "We will go with you, but only if you give me your word that Isabella won't be harmed." "The female is not to be harmed," Jean-Luc said to the others, "at least until the council passes judgment." A sly grin spread across Jean-Luc's face. "As for Roman here, break his legs." "No," I screamed, but they had already surrounded us.